Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Tommo and welcome to my post-race Chinwag, post-race report for the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix. Roll intro. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to a slightly different surrounding. I'm on holiday, so we actually got blue vibes today. Blue shirt, blue lamp, blue chair. There's a bit of lag in the stream, there's a bit of lag last time I used this Osmo Pocket 3 USB'd into my laptop. So we'll see. If there's a bit of a delay between my voice and the video, I apologise. But welcome everyone who's here live. The Wi-Fi's doing bits in this hotel so far. Touch wood. There's no wood around to touch. Oh no, I've cursed it. Anyway, welcome Dimmy, Jacob, Sand, Billy, Halita, Matthew, Road Rage, Dimmy, Jorginho, Jared, Martin, Christopher, Daniel, Prem. Big up Dan. Hope you had a good weekend in Austria. Carl, Yo-Yo, Robert, Henrique, Pit Lane, Radu, Louis, and Daniel, Kaylee, Daniel, David, Alexander. Welcome everyone who's here live on YouTube. Welcome everyone who's here after the fact on YouTube. And of course, as always, everyone who's here on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just through your lugs, all right? One of them, all right? One of them. Also, this is an England-free zone, right? We're not talking about that shambles last night. We are so lucky. What is it about the English and getting really lucky yesterday? Because there was another Englishman who took a certain dub at a Grand Prix, which, look, he put himself in that position to capitalise, but at the end of the day, it should have been a P3 and it was a P1 at the end of the day. So we'll get on to, this is a spicy one, okay? I'm not sure how long this will go on for. I did do a video kind of late last night, basically, because not time zones, but just plain, and I wasn't tired, basically. I was up until like 4 in the morning. So I did a little video just talking my kind of uncut emotions around my feelings around the Verstappen-Norris move. We'll kind of touch on it here. I've talked more about it in that video. So if you want to, my full opinions and thoughts, maybe we'll talk about it in the live stream as well. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how we go here, all right? We've got plenty of time. There's no rush. There's plenty of you here. Let's settle in. Let's talk about the Austrian Grand Prix. First of all, I want to get a race rating, please. Race rating out of 10 for the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix. Obviously, it was a sprint weekend as well. So when we're talking about this, I think it's important to kind of consider the whole weekend. Obviously, we've got sprint quali, a sprint race where it was dicey. It was a decent sprint race. Really enjoyed that one. Quali on Sunday, well, quali for the race Sunday, quali late on Saturday. Max was pretty clear, and it was a bit ominous, to be fair. And for a lot of the race, it was Max pretty clear up ahead, but for once, Red Bull kind of let themselves down, didn't hold up their end of the bargain. A slow left rear for Max allowed McLaren and Lando the opportunity to somewhat capitalise. Actually, yeah, Oscar coming in as well, held up Max a bit as well. So it was one of them. It was a barnstorming end to the race, very interesting end to the race. The start of it was nothing particularly special, but we had some good scraps. We had obviously the Alpine boys scrapping, which is always good fun. Pierre Gasly coming out on top this time, which is good to see, and I think good to see from Alpine's point of view, because he's the guy who's he's set into this team for the long term now, and it was looking concerning at the start of the season. So right, what are we saying, people? I'm seeing quite a lot of 7s, 8s, 9s. Interesting. Okay, let's chuck a little poll. Let's chuck a wee poll out, shall we? And see. So race rating out of 10. Out of 10. I'm going to go with a 6 or lower as the lower option. A 7, an 8, or a 9 or above. So if you're here live on YouTube, do the poll, right? The poll's going. We'll get that going. All right. I want to see yours before. I want to see yours before I show you mine, because I don't want to influence your vote. All right, even subconsciously, because I know how influential I am. All right. I know I'm in your head. I'm in there. Now, Jude. That's Jude. To be fair, I said this is an England-free zone, but that was cold. And they said in the post-match, it was like, "Oh, who writes the scripts?" And he was like, "Me. I do." He can get away with that. Because he scored a bicycle kick to keep us in with less than a minute to go, he's allowed to do it. He's allowed to flash, the ego, right, in that way, like a peacock, you know what I mean? But But yeah, let me know your race rating. How much did you enjoy the... I didn't actually catch it live because I was on the road. I was busy, but I did watch the race back in full. So yeah, it's one of them that, yeah, I'm glad I avoided the spoilers. I was like desperately avoiding spoilers, and I'm glad I did, because damn, that was quite the end. Quite the end of the race. Right, how's the poll looking? So, okay, 6% of you giving it a 6 or lower, a 38 a 7, 40% an 8, and 16% a 9 or above. Okay, interesting. So, I would say you guys have been a bit more generous, than me. I mean, not much really. I've given it a 7. Right, for me, it was a 7 out of 10 race. But to be fair, the weekend as a high, I was considering an 8. I was definitely considering, because I enjoyed the sprint. The sprint was pretty good. I think Lando could and should have done more to hold on to that position. He didn't. Max got it, because Max is still the best driver in F1. I think Oscar, obviously, yeah, if Oscar hadn't have gotten that track limit violation in qualifying for the main race, it would have been very interesting to see. You know, you can look at the result and be like, well, he would have won the race, and he probably would have. But also, him being there, him being a presence behind Lando, most likely, how would McLaren have been able to use that strategically to perhaps manufacture a win outside of this, you know, wheel-to-wheel battle that Lando and Oscar had? It's kind of interesting. But yeah, it certainly was. It wasn't the most thrilling race throughout, but then again, you did have these scraps and battles. Obviously, Charles had to change his front wing and had to try and come back through the field. Perez had to make progress and made none. He did have damage. With that, whenever a driver says, I had damage, it's then almost impossible to really critique them, because you just don't know to what extent that damage. Is it just a cop-out, and is it just an excuse to get some heat off him? Or was the damage serious enough that he finished behind a Haas on pace? Hard to say. But yeah, for me, it was a 7 out of 10. Very much enjoyed it. Again, 5 is average. This was an above average race. 7 out of 10 is a good rating. But and it's memorable because of the crash, because of this kind of sauce, this drama now that has come to the fore between Lando and Max. It's very interesting, though, the way that Lando reacted as well. I think it speaks volumes for a mindset, the mindset that he's in at the moment, because yeah, he wasn't pulling any punches, was he, afterwards? But yeah, time will tell anyway. Time will tell if that one is. This is just a fly in the ointment, a flash in the pan. Kind of like I said with Sainz and Leclerc. Whether they're what did Carlos keep calling it? Ding dong. Like in the interview, about the same amount of times I said "live to fight another day" in my video last night. Carlos says "ding dong" in this interview. His little ding dong with Charles. This little ding dong between Lando and Max. Is it a sign of things to come? I think, you know, when you've got two different drivers, two different teams fighting at the front, and Lando knows he's, certainly before this race and knowing the pace of that McLaren, he's got a chance at a title fight. He has a chance. It's going to take some luck, but there is a chance. And knowing that he could have got the win and how it ended up, and Max obviously still getting P5 and some all right points, Max extended his lead. Even after all this, Max still extended his lead because he beat Lando, and obviously Charles was at the point as well, at the points. And obviously Max got maximum points in the sprint, so crazy. But yeah, I hope this isn't a one-off, just in terms of them battling on track. I would always rather see two drivers go wheel to wheel and not crash into each other. But again, we'll get into it. Sorry, yeah, no pink today. I mean, not pink. There is some pink, but I think this was a better composition for the shot. Right, so race result is as follows. George Russell takes the win over Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz. Obviously, you know, P1 to P4, George to Lewis all benefited. 2 positions gained from the scrap. But even then, you know, Hulkenberg P6 behind Verstappen, but obviously ahead of Lando. He would have got P7 in the end, ahead of Sergio Perez. Passed basically on the last lap. Checo was all over Nico, but Nico held on, got the job redone into turn 4. I've not seen full on board of that, actually. I've seen a little bit of it. They did a little cutaway in the post-race interviews. But yeah, I'd really like to see Nico and Checo's final lap battle again, because I reckon that was, I mean, look, Haas points for days, right? What, Magnussen got 4, Hulkenberg got 8 points. 12 points for Haas is huge, massive. Jeans are happy. Got to say it, Komatsu has come in, and obviously in a short time frame you can only have limited change on the team, but he has come in and seemingly steadied that ship somewhat and is extracting the potential that I think that team and that car has shown for a while, right? Because they've got a good power unit and they've got a really close relationship with Ferrari, and Ferrari are quick. Not amazing this weekend, but they are quick still. And it feels like Komatsu is making the most. He is more efficiently utilising the resource they have, and especially Nico. But Kevin's a very good driver as well. None of these are mugs. And getting this result, P6 and P8, huge for Haas. Ricciardo, P9, 2 points on the board. Gasly, P10 as well. 4 points finishes in a row now for Pierre. A good momentum for Alpine. You know, I think Alpine has, I mean, there is now you look at where, you know, Albon, Bottas, Zhou and Sargent are. There is a distinct bottom 2 now. I think that's fair to say. Williams and Sauber are definitely off the back, which are Carlos's 2 realistic options, which is kind of mad. I know there's talk of Alpine being an option for Carlos, but I don't see it. So yeah, top 10, Russell, Piastri, Sainz, Hamilton, Verstappen, Hulkenberg, Perez, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Gasly. Leclerc just outside the points. Obviously had the front wing change on lap 1. After lap 1, he was filling in a sandwich between Piastri and Hamilton on the inside, I think. Can't remember. Either way, he was a bit unlucky. It happens lap 1, unfortunately. He was the unfortunate not beneficiary, the opposite of a beneficiary. So, yeah, wasn't able to recover to the points. That's 2 races in a row now. Scholl out of the points entirely. Ocon P12, outpaced by Gasly, for sure. Stroll, Tsunoda, poor race from Yuki. Very poor race from Yuki. Look at where Daniel finished. Look, Daniel needs more results like this. If Daniel can keep doing this consistently, because he had a good race, I think, Daniel. If he can keep maximising the racing balls, and Checo keeps honking, he's still got a chance of that seat by the end of this year. There is 100%, there must be a performance clause in Checo's contract. There has to be. Otherwise, Christian is not the genius team principal that he has cultivated a reputation to be. Because think what you like of Christian, I think as a team principal, he is proven. But the decision to keep Checo is becoming increasingly, odd. But there you go. Albon 15, Bottas 16, Zhou 17, Alonso 18, harpooned Zhou, didn't he? Not a good weekend for Fernando. Another bad weekend for Aston Martin. Sargent, he damaged front wing lap 1 as well. And Lando did not finish. Destroyed It's interesting, wasn't it? Because obviously Verstappen got the puncture straight away. Lando didn't get the puncture till later, but then the puncture that he got, was tearing up the back of the car. So he had to retire in the end. Not sure if it was damage to I think one of them had damage to the rim and the other had just a puncture. But either way, nil point for Lando Norris. Could he have lived to fight another day? I did talk about that in our video, you know. Did Max squeeze him off? Did Max give him a full car's width? No. Have we seen that squeeze happen before? And the car on the outside has elected to dip their 2 left wheels on the curb, so for there to not be contact and to live to fight another day. In hindsight, Lando might look back at that and be like, yeah, I should have done that. But also, if you allow Max to push you off the track, does that set some kind of, psychological... It's sporting moments under incredible pressure. And it's easy to look back on this, on all these moments and reflect with, you know, I'm sat here in a hotel room, right? You're sat there at home, probably on the toilet, wherever you are, right? And that's sport, like, and it's exciting, and I love it. I love it. I do indeed. Right, so that's the race result, anyway, for the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix. Driver standings are as follows. Max extends his, like I say, still extends his championship lead. And this is what, like, for there to be a championship fight, it was always going to require some luck, because there isn't a consistent second quickest now to Max. Max is still the best driver in F1, I think, quite clearly. Even if the car is, you know, it's not a dominant car any longer, but I think Max is good enough to still, you know, he was pretty clear in this race. You know, he opened up like an 8-second gap pretty quick on. So, yeah, I think that it was always going to take a lot. And unfortunately for Lando and Charles, you know, they've both picked up fewer points than they should have in these last 2 weekends. And Max he's obviously not maximised in Austria because of the contact and falling down to P5, but he's still delivered more points than them too. The constructors is a different story, but either way, it was always going to be a stretch, and it's even more of a stretch now for a championship fight, at least in the driver standings. But it does line up incredibly well for 25. I think 25 next year, all of the evidence we're seeing is that it's going to be an absolute banger, right? I'm excited for that. Only Ivan Toney can save Red Bull. Right, Charles Leclerc doesn't gain any points. In terms of position change here, obviously Hulkenberg's jumped up. Ollie Behrman's finally moved down a position to P14. But yeah, Hulkenberg's jumped up. So Ricciardo gains a few points. Magnussen's jumped up a bit. Other than that, Joe is still ahead of Bottas, which is not acceptable. I can't believe it's all because Joe got that P11 in Bahrain, first race of the season. Because since then, Bottas has been slam dunking him, and it was another bit of a stinker from Zhou Guanyu. And look, Terry, I say it because he is. I think it's fair to say, I think he is Terry, and I think that is an important thing to, you know, you look at the quality of all the drivers in Formula One right now. You know, the way that Max is able to deliver so consistently, how dominant he was, and ultimately it was Red Bull with the dodgy pit stop that allowed the opportunity for Lando to come back at him, because they essentially, with a bad pit stop, undid all of Max's hard work. But yeah, I enjoyed that though. It was a good race, good fun. Right, so team standings. What that gap from Red Bull to Ferrari is now 64 points. 64 points, which is, Charles didn't score at all, and Carlos got P4. No, he got P3, obviously, didn't he? Got a podium. Yet, the gap is still only 64 points. And obviously, yeah, Max fell down to P5. But Checo wasn't there to pick up the pieces, wasn't anywhere near to pick up the pieces. Yet, you know, Checo and Oscar start similar parts of the track. Oscar recovers to get close to a win. And damage, again, I know, damage, Checo, I know he had damage. To what extent that affected his performance, we don't know. But then even before this, you know, in the sprint race, in the sprint quali, in the normal quali, Checo was not impressing. He was not demonstrating he had the pace, and finishing where he finished was probably about right. But game's the game. Game's the game. Otherwise, we've got, oh yeah, of course, yeah, Haas and Alpine are in the wrong colours, but you don't have to worry about that. We're doing different colours there. I'm in blue, right? This is blue background, right? My pink channel. We're just changing things up, right? So Haas do leapfrog Alpine in the constructors, 19 points now. Alpine with 9, but another point for Pierre Gasly. So well done, Pierre. Good race from him. Good momentum from Alpine. Now I think they needed this. They're demonstrating something that I think can give Pierre a bit of confidence. But also, when it comes to Pierre extending, it's like, did he have any other opportunities, really? Were there any other realistic seat options out there? I'm not so convinced. But yeah, Mercedes closing up somewhat to McLaren, true, yeah. I mean, a big struggle at the start of the year, but they're on the way. Will Sauber stay pointless this season? I'd be surprised, Patrick. I'd be surprised if an opportunity doesn't present itself at some race where one of them can fluke a top 10. But that's what it's going to take, isn't it? That's what it's going to take. Right, okay. Let's reflect on some predictions now. Obviously, pre-race stream that we did on Thursday or Wednesday, whenever I did it. I gave my predictions for the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix, and you gave yours. So let's see who came out on top. And to be honest, not a great day in the office. My predictions were as such. So race winner Lando Norris. Could have been. Maybe should have been. Depends who you ask. That didn't happen. Banger drive Pierre Gasly. It was a good drive. It was not a banger drive. There were better drives, I think, out there. But he did a good job, better than his teammate. So I was half tempted to give myself half a point for that, but I think that was a bit too generous. So no point for Pierre Gasly. Clanger drive Carlos Sainz. No. I mean, again, got a podium. Was P5 in terms of pace, which is about where the Ferrari seemed to be this weekend, and didn't make the mistake in qualifying that obviously Charles did to bottle that and have to start so far down the order, which again resulted in you're more like, if you start at the back, and Checo knows this, if you start down towards the back or in the middle of the pack, you're more likely to get caught up in these incidents. So that's exactly what happened for Charles. Banger team McLaren, I give half a point for that because ultimately I don't think McLaren really did too much wrong there. Like, McLaren gave Lando a package where he could have won this race and didn't make the mistake that Red Bull did in that moment. They also gave Oscar Piastri a package that he could recover to P2 with. Would have been P4 without Lando and Max having their little shindig. Maybe even P3 if there was no VSC. It's hard to say, but also, like, Oscar made his mistake. We'll get into that in qualifying with the track limits. And obviously, Lando and Max, that's... so I think McLaren held up their end of the bargain this weekend. That's what I'm saying. And Clanger team Aston Martin. I mean, they're absolutely up there because they are... I mean, looking at this weekend, 8th quickest car, probably. Probably the 8th quickest car, which is savage. Savagery. So my predictions, 1.5 points out of 5, not great. Your predictions, slightly better. Race winner Lando, you're also wrong. Banger drive Lando, it was good. I don't think it was the banger drive. I think there were other more impressive drives. I was half tempted to give you half a point because for him to be, they were both 15 seconds clear of George Russell when they started to lock horns. And I think he does deserve some credit for that. But do I think it was a potential banger drive? No, I don't. And he got driver of the day again, which, I mean, again, it's a popularity contest. It's not a genuine reflection of what actually went on in the race. So you're not getting a point for that. Clanger drive Checo, he's absolutely up there. No question, no doubt. You can blame damage all you like, but he's qualifying a mile off Max, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And McLaren again, half a point. Aston Martin 1 point. Well done. So you got 2.5. I got 1.5. Right. Well done, you. Well done. Well done, you. Well done. Right. I'm getting you next time. You're not gonna win next time. Don't worry. I got Silverstone. Right. Easy win for me in Silverstone. But you take the dub this time out. Okay. But what about bangers and clangers for the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix? Starting with mine. Okay. My banger drive this weekend was Nico Hülkenberg. I think to hold off and re-overtake Perez on that final lap, to get that P6, to do what he did in qualifying, to put it P9. Kevin had the more impressive sprint, for sure. Kevin got P9 as well, and obviously P8 in the race, which does demonstrate that this did have pace around this track. Neither of them were struggling with a difficult car this weekend, a slow car this weekend. This Haas was clearly, clear of the Sauber and the Williams, probably clear of the Alpine, definitely clear of the Aston Martin, probably maybe clear of the Racing Bulls. But at the end of the day, they delivered. They held up their end of the bargain. And Nico Hülkenberg, P6, huge. Huge for the team. Great drive from him. Again, I think if he'd lost position to Checo at the end, then obviously it's still a great drive. but I would have maybe considered. I will say, right, I think George, obviously, he didn't really do anything wrong. He didn't really put a foot wrong, like in this race, like in terms of where he qualified. He drove the race. He put himself in that position to capitalise. He put himself ahead of Lewis, ahead of both Ferraris. Obviously, he was ahead of Oscar, ahead of Checo, which goes without saying. I think George deserves a lot of credit for his drive. I also think Oscar deserves a lot of credit because we'll get into it. I don't agree with his lap being deleted in qualifying. Personally, I don't agree with it, and I'll explain why. So for him to recover to P2, P4 without the crash, and almost pick up the pieces and take the win, that overtake on Carlos Sainz, filth. Great moves throughout, great drive, level, measured, exactly what Red Bull need Checo to be. Oscar is proving that you can do that as a 1.5 year, not far gone a rookie. So I think Piastri deserves some credit, but I'm giving it Nico. Very impressive once again. I think Sauber are going to get a great driver next year, and hopefully they can give him a car to cook in, because right now he must be a bit concerned, right? I reckon Nico should be a bit concerned about where Sauber are right now. Clanger drive Fernando. I've given it Fernando. He harpooned Sonoda. He harpooned Zhou Guanyu, and I think that all in all, the Aston struggled for pace. It was another. It just wasn't strong from Fernando all weekend. He was out qualified by Lance in the sprint, only just to be fair. Got out of Q1 in main quali, but then qualified 15th. The Aston was slow, don't get me wrong, but that was a mistake. Him just misjudging the braking so much and hitting Joe is not a mistake I expect to see from Fernando Alonso. I was surprised. I was surprised by that. He got his penalty, which was deserved, and look, there's other drivers who had a stinker as well. I know a lot of you saying Checo, right? But at the end of the day, because of the damage, I can't say with chest really how bad Checo was, because you've got that scapegoat. And again, maybe drivers, it's a shame really, because it'd be lovely to know how much, a damage can actually is affecting the driver's lap time, like factually, not just trusting the driver and what they're saying, or trusting the team what they're saying. Like Lewis Hamilton, he picked up some damage. Not sure if that was not sure when he picked that up. It was like during the Grand Prix. I'm not sure if it was debris from the Max Lando thing or it was earlier than that. But again, when someone's got damage, it's like, oh, well, I don't know. How much did that affect their race? I mean, Oscar had contact with Charles in turn 1, lap 1, and that didn't seem to stop him performing. So, yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, I meant, with Sainz. Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know, because I feel like Lewis picked up damage later on than that, though, like the floor. Because I know there was like side pod with Carlos. But I feel like Lewis copped some damage at another point as well in the race. But look, at the end of the day, not a good drive from Fernando Alonso, not a good weekend for Fernando Alonso, not a good weekend for Aston Martin either. So, he's my clanger for me. And yes, Fernando had fastest lap, but you know what? When you bolt on softs at the end, that's what happens, So no one got fastest lap. No one got the fastest lap point anyway. No one got fastest lap point. So, yeah, is what it is. I think when you harpoon another driver, it's hard to avoid the clanger drive. What can I say? Banging team, easy, Haas. I've already explained why. Don't need to carry on about that anymore. And then clanger team, Aston Martin. Already explained why. Don't really need to go about it anymore. I think it's very clear the best team and the worst team this weekend in terms of maximising their own potential and performance. So yeah, Haas and Aston Martin are my shouts. Up the Komatsu. Love it. Those are mine, your bangers and clangers, and 1,853 of you voted, so thank you for voting. I do much appreciate that. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss the polls, or follow me on Twitter, @TOMMO'S. Right. banger drive for you was Nico. 50% of the vote up the Nico Hülkenberg. Love to see it. 21% Oscar Piastri. I'm glad Piastri was getting credit and getting visual and getting eyeballs. I like that. 13% George Russell. 6% Lando Norris. Would I have put Lando 6th? Because I do think... Oh, thank you, Lauren, by the way, for gifting some memberships. Much appreciated. Very kind of you. Do I think, in terms of other drivers... Because, again, I think, yes... Yeah, I think Max was at fault for the contact. Do I think Lando could have lived to fight another day? As I said 1,000 times in my video yesterday. Yes, he could have chosen to dip 2 wheels onto the curb. He wasn't obliged to, but he could have. But it wasn't his fault, the contact. And it was very unlucky as well. That's the thing. That banging the wheels happens fairly often. And for them to both get punches kind of reminds me of Leclerc Vettel in Brazil, wasn't it? When Vettel drifted over into Charles and puncture for both of them. Mein Gott, muss das sein? Iconic Seb radio. I do miss Seb's radios. They were decent. And it happens. It happens in this game. But it was a good race. I think outside of Hülkenberg, Piastri, Russell, I think Ricardo deserves credit to get that P9. Gasly obviously having a good scrap with Ocon, getting ahead and getting P10. But I do think Lando deserves credit for getting himself into that position, and he wasn't at fault. So I do somewhat understand it. We'll talk more about that. Zach Brown has sabotaged Red Bull. Don't know about that. Don't know about that. Okay, Clanger drive. Your Clanger drive. 29% Checo. So big vote for Checo. Well, no, it's not actually. 29% is not a big vote for Checo, but 25% Max Verstappen, 19% Alonso, 12% Leclerc. So it's actually the opposite. It's quite a spread vote for Clanger drive, but Checo takes the dub. Look, again, with the damage, I can't, with confidence, be like, he had a bad race. We don't know to what extent the damage was affecting his performance. I don't think it was much. That's my opinion, based off of the performance he was demonstrating before that point, before the race, in the sprint quali, in the normal quali. So I don't think it's much of a cop-out. But maybe if he didn't have the damage, he'd have finished ahead of Hülkenberg. But I don't think much more than that. So, yeah, tough. Clanger, Verstappen. Now, obviously, he was leading the race. Red Bull let their side down by giving him a poor pit stop, which then allowed Lando to get back in and recover. Obviously, Max then had his lock up on the mediums, didn't he? Almost went onto the gravel. I think the move in under braking, there's a really good analysis from Anthony Davidson, which I'd recommend. You can probably find it on Twitter, because I think for Sky it's on a paywall. And I know the first thing, because he's British, because Anthony Davidson's British, he must be biased against Verstappen. Like, it's so lazy, it's so boring. Like, the amount of times you just see these comments, like, bro, if the amount of people who like have accused me, and first of all, I'm not even being crazy critical of Verstappen for the squeeze, because I think Lando could have done more to get out of it. But also, it's like, it's just so lazy. It's like you can't like argue your point, so you're just being like, oh, you're just biased. I love this job. I'm so privileged to be able to do what I do, but that part of it does my head in. It absolutely does my head in, because people just don't want to. They just want to accuse you of bias, and I'd be like, okay, so interesting, British bias. So who did I think was at fault for Silverstone 21? Was it Lewis? I think it was Lewis, actually. I think there's actual recording of me live at the race being like, that's on Lewis. But anyway, I'm just biased against Max, so there we go. Game's the game. But yeah, he was. I do believe he was. The penalty was correct, because he put Lando in a position where he was forcing Lando off track, or there was contact, and there was contact. So I think the penalty was correct, and he fell down to P5. Could have been a DNF. you know, he was able to hold on to that car to get it around the lap and not ruin it. Kind of in a way that, well, obviously the concept is very different, like when Lewis won Silverstone on 3 wheels. Getting around a lap with a puncher, enough to still finish ahead of Checo as well. Bro, that's crazy. But yeah, Max 25%, the Clanger vote. Alonso 19, Charles Leclerc 12, which again, like, I do think, you know, the biggest thing to critique Charles with is for sure the Saturday, the quali, because he did bottle the lap. He went off, got dusty wheels, same place where Oscar went off and got the track limit ping, but Charles actually went into the gravel, got dusty wheels, and then that messed him up in the final sector. Went wide, had a bump along and fell back, and then that led to that if Charles had had a clean qualifying, you know, that's his responsibility, and he messed up. So I think that's somewhat fair. I think that's somewhat fair to Charles to put him in Clanger, because qualifying is so important now because it's so close, and if you make a mistake in qualifying and it's on you as a driver, that is going to massively affect your race performance. Banger team, there was only 3 teams in the fight, and obviously Haas take the win, 73%. Mercedes 17, got to take that. Obviously George able to capitalise in the end, and you know, if Lewis didn't have this damage, then who knows where he would have finished. Obviously difficult one to take for him. It's not going to be the poetic end to his Mercedes journey, I think, that he was hoping it to be. And it's going to be a slog. It's going to be a slog for Lewis. It's going to be tough, but George took the win, and fair play to him. I don't think he put a foot wrong. So he kind of he merited the opportunity when it presented itself. And then 9% McLaren. Yeah, I mean, again, they gave their drivers the tools to get a 2-3. McLaren gave their drivers the tools to get a 2-3 without question. They got a 2-0. And that's more on the drivers than anything. And then finally, Clanger team, Aston Martin, 50% of the vote. Red Bull 25. Yeah, again, there's a conversation to be had around Red Bull's responsibility for Checo's bad performances. Well, we've had this conversation many a time. Well, we'll get into that. We'll go team by team. Sauber 11%. Williams 10. Not good, Williams. Thank you, Lucas, for the super chat. Should Lando have backed off as soon as he saw that Max wouldn't give him space around the outside and potentially avoided the crash? Well, let's talk about it, shall we? Why is my camera small? I definitely changed this before. And it's just like clipped back. There we go. Perfect. Well, let's talk about this now then, shall we? Actually, you know what? Let's go to the main screen, right? Let's go to the main screen and talk about the main festivity from yesterday's race. Lucas, like you say in the super chat, should Lando have backed off as soon as he saw that Max wouldn't give him space around the outside and potentially avoided the crash? So, what you've just said there, Lucas, is that the onus, who is the onus on? So Lando is on the outside. He's as far to the left as the white line is. Okay? Now, drivers use the curbs all the time, and you only ping track limits when all 4 wheels are to the wrong side of that white line, okay? We know this. This is very clear. We know this, right? So Lando could have, and because there's a curb, because there's all this, right? Lando could have gone over, right? And lived to fight another day, as I like to say. The onus isn't on him to do so. He doesn't have to do that. And he chose to not do that. And therefore, Max hit him. But it's still Max hitting Lando. It's still Max is picking a trajectory that means either Lando stays fully within track limits, or he technically, in the right end of the rules, and like technically you are forcing another driver to go off the track somewhat. Not fully off the track, but somewhat off the track. So when you say, should Lando have backed off as soon as he saw that Max wouldn't give him space around the outside? Well, what I think should have happened is Max should have given Lando a full car's width. I think that's what should have happened. But I can understand in that corner, in turn 3, and again, in my video that I put out last night, you look at Vettel and Hamilton, 2018, I want to say, and Vettel does the exact same thing, squeezes Lewis over, Lewis chooses to put wheels on the curb to avoid Vettel hitting him. Because if Lewis doesn't do that, if Lewis holds his left wheel on the white line or within the white line, Vettel will hit him and there will be contact. And that would be Vettel's fault. But Lewis chooses to, and again, this is the thing, if Lando had dipped those wheels on the left, there wouldn't be this conversation because it wouldn't be egregious enough to be like, oh my God, Max forced Lando off the track. It would be, well, that's what happens in this corner. It's happened many a time before. And because there's no gravel, because there's no real loss, all right, there's no grass, there's no AstroTurf. If you're forcing a driver, if you're forcing to dip two wheels, well, you know the long right-hander, right, turn 4, 5, whatever it is. I can never remember around Austria because there's certain corners that aren't even corners. The long right-hander, the downhill right-hander, right? If you force a car to put two wheels outside the white lines, well, there's still a curb there. But if you're forcing a car to put two wheels outside of the curb and into the gravel, then that's very clear and obvious that, all right, that's naughty, that's over the line. So this is my long way of saying that Lando could have done more and I think should have done more to him, for himself, for self-preservation purposes, because A, we know Max is likely to put the squeeze on, and we know the way Max races, right, especially after 2021, we all saw it, right, Max will push these boundaries to and over. And again, I'm talking about what Lando should have done and reflecting on what his responsibility is to himself. You know that, I think that he could, would and should have done things differently to hold on to that position and get at least a P2, if not, you know, he had the, that's the thing, Lando was behind at the DRS line as well. So if Lando had dipped two wheels on the curb and Max had forced him somewhat wide, I think Lando would have got the opportunity down into that long downhill right-hander, turn 4, 5, whatever it is. I think Lando would have got that chance, and I think he probably would have taken it late on in the race as it was. And I think because Lando knows how close he was to winning that race, I think that makes it harder for him to accept what happened. And I think that plays into why he was so frustrated after the race. Is it turn 4? Oh, there we go, it's turn 4. Thank you, Christopher, for the super chat. Wow, thank you very much, Christopher. Very kind of you. It was a mixture of Lando being desperate for the overtake and Max trying his elbows out too wide, which in result made it a recipe for disaster. And look, I've seen people say about like Lando being desperate to make the move, and like that's what we want, right? You want to overtake for the lead. Like, of course you're going to like go for it and be desperate to make the move. And you know, I think having looked now at more onboards come out over time after the race finishes. I think something that people are missing about the whole like Lando dive bombs is that, you know, when Max made that dive bomb on Lewis, Abu Dhabi 2021, right? Which I thought at the time, Lewis should have. I think that was a fair move from Max. I think he was ahead at the apex, and he kept it within track limits. He's the aggressor trying to go for the overtake. Lewis cut the corner, stayed ahead. I thought Lewis should have given back the position. I thought that then in 21. I think that now. And in this instance, Lando dive bombed up the inside, was ahead at the apex, and stayed within track limits. And Max went wide and stayed ahead. I think that is consistent. And I think in both instances, I think Lewis should have given position back to Max in 21. And I think Max kept that position unfairly. I think both instances, I think Max kept the position unfairly yesterday. Lewis kept the position unfairly in Abu Dhabi. Because I think they're both very, very, very similar incidents. Very similar incidents. Different corners, different tracks, but very tight corners, hard braking zones. The attacking driver gets up the inside and gets ahead at the apex and gets it slowed down and keeps it within track limits. So, you know what, you call that desperate, but that was a fair move from Lando. I think that was a fair move from Lando. The one before that was the more, and the one before that I think was the more egregious move from Max under braking. Because when you look at the replay from Max's rear camera, I do believe he moved under braking. To what extent it deserves to be punished, you know, it's hard to say. It's a bit of a grey area. I do think, and when the car in front of you moves under braking, you brake most efficiently in a straight line. Lando, by having to adjust his trajectory to compensate for Max moving under braking, he doesn't brake as efficiently, and he has to go out wide to the left and go around. So, I don't know, I've seen a lot of people say, you know, Lando was driving, and, you know, Lando was getting pinged for track limits. Obviously, he got his 5-second penalty for it, which is, I mean, that's the same rule for everyone. You get so many pings and then you get a penalty. And I saw certain people, oh, Lando was cheating by doing track limits. I'm like, bro, it's the same rule for everyone. Like, almost every driver will bank 2 and then just, like, they'll take liberties twice to get away with it because you're fine until you get the 3rd. So, I don't know. I feel like what Lando was trying was fair. I didn't see it being desperate, personally. I didn't. I saw it as hard racing, and I saw them coming together as probably the least egregious, because Max didn't give him room by, like, it's centimetres. It's fine margins. I think Max assumed, Max knows what he's doing. I think Max knows he's giving Lando the squeeze, but also I think he assumes, well, of course, I think Max just thinks, well, Lando's just going to dip 2 wheels on the curb because it's fine, there's runoff. Like, he can use the curb, it's not going to hold him up, and I can just squeeze him a bit more. And Lando didn't do that. And look, I've seen, you know, I think there was a big argument a lot of times in 21. For example, that one in Saudi, I think that was Brazil as well. Saudi and Brazil, where Max just barely slows the car down on the inside to just stay ahead. I mean, use the word desperate. Those moves were desperate from Max to keep position. And in those instances, and you look at what was like Imola when they're side by side and Max just sees Lewis off. You know, if Lewis holds place, they do make contact. And you look back at some of those instances, like, if Lewis had held position and stayed on the track, Max would have crashed into him. And then, you know, who gets damage? Max gets a penalty, blah, blah, blah. But because Lewis would bail out, would choose to bail out, and maybe that's, you know, when I say about Lewis cutting the corner in Abu Dhabi, but that one's different though, because Max stayed on track. That's the thing. That's the different one. Max stayed on track, and in this instance, Lando stayed on track relative to Max. So, yeah, look, the long and the short of it is that I don't think, I think Max, the penalty was correct for Max, but I'm not crazy. Like, I get why he would have thought Lando would have dipped wheels on the curb, because that is a pretty dumb thing around this corner, even though technically track limits. Sorry, I talked for a long time about that and I just completely ignored you, chat. I'm sorry. And look, when you're, I think it's a fine margin, isn't it? If Lando does concede and go onto the curb and Max stays ahead or whatever, like, a lot of this is a mentality game, and like knowing what the other driver's going to do and trying to get the upper hand. And I think Lando just was like, well, I'm here, I'm holding position, I don't have to go off the track, and if you're going to drive into me, which you did, then you're going to drive into me. And it's just the outcome is very unlucky. The outcome is very unlucky for both of them. Thank you, Clinton. So Max thought Lando had plenty of room on the outside, so he'd use it. Also, Lando thought Max had plenty of room on the inside, so he would use it. Well, again, I think the difference is trajectories, isn't it? Lando, within the rules, and again, like you it's not realistic, but ultimately track limits is defined at the white line. So imagine there is a wall there. You know, Lando is braking in a straight line. Max is braking in a straight line, but at an angle towards Lando. And so he's the one who moves into Lando. And therefore, that is why he gets a penalty. I mean, that's pretty clear and obvious. So, but yeah, that's the way it is. And obviously everyone has taken it very well online, and everyone's had very nuanced and grown-up conversation and kept it not at all personal to anyone expressing their opinions on a matter of racing. Because, you know, we're all adults here, right? We're yeah? No? That's not right, is it? Thank you, Shabby, by the way. It's not British bias, it's Dutch down. Dutch down. Oh, love it, love it. Yeah, no, you know, it's always, Twitter's not the place for nuanced discussion. I see some people trying to have genuine conversations on Twitter. I'm like, bro, stop trying. Like, you are wasting your time. You are wasting your time. Okay. But yeah, look, I hope that. Listen, I think Lando was emotional afterwards. He was frustrated. This doesn't need to like sour their relationship. Like, this is the first time Lando's really up now fighting, and it's the first time really they've really had a ding dong like this, as Carlos would say. Like, I get Lando's frustrated in the moment. I think he'll get over it. I think they'll be better in Silverstone, but I think when the helmets go on, Lando's got a choice to make, and so is Max. Right? They've both got choices to make here in how they choose to go racing. And Max was punished. Max was given a penalty for that. And yes, it didn't affect the outcome of his race, but that's not. You shouldn't choose a penalty based on what punishes the driver. Like, it should be a set penalty for a set infringement, a set infraction. I did think it was naughty though, Max squeezing Lando afterwards, which that's the main kind of crux of my video, because again, I kind of get why Max did what he did for the squeeze, but that squeeze afterwards, I think Max knows what he's doing. I think he can see Lando coming. He knows Lando's got the trajectory. He knows Lando's right behind him, obviously, because they've just had contact. And he moves across the track. And I've seen, but look, maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe I'm wrong. But I believe Max knew what he was doing and didn't want to let Lando by, even though Max got a puncher, and just moved across the track and Lando had to get out of it on the grass. That's my opinion. I think too highly of Max to think that he didn't know where Lando was and know that Lando was coming and know that Lando was going past him at a pretty significant pace deficit around the outside. I think Max, if Lando's not there, I think he knows he's got a puncher. He sticks to the left-hand side. He doesn't drive across the track. That's my opinion. But obviously impossible to prove one way or another what his intent was, because Max didn't think he was moving under braking, which the more I see it, the more I'm like, I think you probably were, mate. I don't think that the numbers don't lie in that situation. Look at where you have to brake, where the 100-meter board is, which is where you're braking, and when Max moves the position of his car, I think it's fairly clear, but not so clear that the stewards gave him a penalty. But yeah. Anyway, they'll get on with it, right? They're adults, right? They'll be fine next race. I've not really got much more to say on that. So Alpine, well done, Pierre. Beat Ocon, extended his contract. Still don't really know yet. I mean, in terms of that second seat, who are we thinking now for that second seat? Are we still thinking Doohan? Still thinking Doohan alongside Esteban? Because, 4-point scoring finishes in a row for Pierre. The momentum is creeping up. Yes, they're behind Haas, but consistency of Alpine has been more impressive than Haas as of late. So even though obviously Haas banked big points, I would still have more faith in Alpine to get that P7 over the course of the rest of the year. Obviously, Sainz is being linked somewhat with Alpine, and maybe it's a late smash and grab for Carlos Sainz on Alpine's point of view. Obviously, he did used to drive for Renault prior to his McLaren days. He was at Renault, so I don't know how much that plays into it, because obviously there will be a lot of people at Enstone he used to work with back then. I still think, Mick's obviously being suggested. Now, obviously, Briatore is an interesting one because he's come into that team. He is Jack Doohan's manager, but he was also team principal at Benetton when Michael Schumacher was there. So there is a pre-existing relationship with the Schumachers to an extent. I don't know what that relationship is now. Okay, I'm just assuming based off of past relationships that there is something there between the Briatore, between Flavio and between the Schumachers to an extent. But he's also Jack Doohan's manager. I think Jack is a great shout. I think Mick had enough of an opportunity to impress, and especially relative to Magnussen. It's that Magnussen season, alongside K-Mag, when he was shunting left, right and centre, which I just to me, that's just that's too much. And I think Jack would be the better, the better choice for that team. But obviously Mick is a Schumacher, and to see Mick come back and to see him improve, I don't think he did enough to merit a return. But if he come back, you got to back him, right? And I back him to improve. It's just, I think Doohan has more of an upside for Alpine. He's also very engrossed in the in that test role. Yeah, I think Jack's the guy. And I think seeing what happened with Oscar, they will have enough data to know, right, where is Jack relative to where Oscar was? We know how good Oscar is. We're seeing it at McLaren. Is this data suggesting Jack is anywhere near Oscar? If he is, then you go with Jack. That's the way I see it. Bring back Stoffel. Amazing. That'd be a vibe. That would be a vibe. What do you disagree with, Professor, out of interest, should I say? About Schumacher not doing enough when he was alongside K-Mag? Because obviously the season alongside Mazepin, you can't really glean too much from that because the Haas was absolutely awful and Mazepin was Mazepin. So yeah, I think that, oh no, that's the way that's why I sit on that. Thank you, Christopher, again for the super chat. Very generous, mate. Appreciate it. K-Meg mentioned in an interview that everyone is waiting on Carlos to make up his decision. The big domino needs to fall before we see the floodgates open up with driver moves. Yeah, I think that Carlos just needs to make a decision now. I don't think there's much more that he shouldn't really be looking at current form, because this is a move, this is a project for 26 and onwards. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things where these teams are going to be, Sauber, Williams, Alpine, for the rest of this year and for next year. This is all with 26 play. And if Alpine are going with a Ferrari engine, which I've seen rumoured, if they are going to drop their own, then as much as that is deeply embarrassing for Alpine and Renault as a business, I think that would make the team more competitive, having a more competitive engine. Because if they've got the deficit they have in their PU and they can still finish P10 in a race, imagine if they didn't have that PU deficit. The chassis probably isn't actually that bad. So yeah, we'll see. I'll still bet on Doohan. Be a good race from Pierre. Well done. Good to see. I'm glad Pierre's recovering this now, because it was a bit concerning at the start of the year how Esteban was kind of dunking on him pretty consistently. But yeah, time will tell. Aston Martin, not much to say. Not much to say. The qualifying deficit from Fernando and Lance has closed right up, which is interesting. How much of it do we think, these last kind of 4 or 5 races, it has genuinely been pretty close between Lance and Fernando? Objectively, you look at the qualifying deficit, Lance has got his fair share of dubs over Fernando now, and got another one at the sprint, but still. How much do we think it is? Because, look, we know the quality of Fernando Alonso. We know he's losing patience with this team, understandably, right? Maybe losing patience is wrong to say. He's signed up for a long-term thing with Aston Martin. He knows there is the potential, the resource there. I think him saying the words he has is an attempt to motivate the team. And actually, I think that is a good thing to do. And I think that is a productive thing to do for Fernando. So actually, no, I take that back. I don't think he's losing patience with the team. I think it's just they're going through a tough period and he's trying to light a fire underneath them. But also, I do think, Lance has been in, and this shouldn't be this should be a given how long he's been in Formula 1 for. But Lance is good enough to capitalise when Fernando isn't firing all cylinders, which I don't think Fernando is. I think that mistake hitting Joe is indicative of a struggle that Fernando's having in this car in this moment with this team, especially when it was so good at the start as well. He played an unreal card when he joined Aston Martin, but now it's not looking quite so kosher, you know. I think, is Aston trying to make the car more drivable for Lance, which hurts Fernando? No, I don't believe that, Theo. I mean, we don't know. That's the answer. I don't know. You don't know. We don't know. But I just think this is a product of, you know, if Aston Martin, you can imagine being Fernando Alonso and where they were at the start of 2022, no, 23, sorry, not even 22, 23, it's literally like last year. And now seeing the trajectory of McLaren, Mercedes even, right, who've been bumped around all over the place, and now they're like quicker than Ferrari in Austria. It must be frustrating. It must be really frustrating to like have such a good start, and then just L after L. So yeah, I don't think it's a. I think it's just a product of the environment not being conducive at the moment to success, and it being difficult to extract that performance. But yeah, not a good weekend for Aston Martin once again, and I don't think they're expecting much for Silverstone either. So yeah, moving on. Ferrari. Yeah, I mean, Carlos drove a solid race. Obviously, their lack of pace now relative to McLaren. Well, yeah, both McLarens really. I think Oscar would be a lot closer if he didn't have the incident in quali. I think Leclerc's messed up in quali here. He's made a mistake and he's paid the price for it. And it's been compounded by the lap 1 contact, which was super unlucky. That's the thing. Like, this is the kind of thing where Max is still going to win the Drivers' Championship, because there's not like Charles was the guy at some point after Monaco. You're like, right, this is the guy. He's only 30 points behind Max or whatever it was. This is the guy to fight. 2 pointless weekends in a row. That's the difference. And call it luck, call it, you know, skill issue, all you like, but it doesn't happen with Max. Even when Max has contacts, he still gets P5, which is still decent points. So, yeah, I think Ferrari having a bit of a wobble. Recent resurgence has been very good, but I think this is the first real wobble under the Fred Vasseur guardianship of that team. So, yeah, I think that Ferrari, drivers are good, cars having a bit of a wobble, upgrades maybe aren't delivering quite what they were hoping, but I'm still hopeful for 25, but I don't think it's now. I think we've seen enough to know that the Ferrari is not the car to fight Max this season. It is the McLaren with Lando Norris. I think that's the only realistic chance of a title fight, and even then it's a stretch. Charles gave away always luck in that Monaco win. Yeah, tough. The other Ferrari team though, Ferrari 2, otherwise known as Haas. Damn, yeah. I mean, again, I said it earlier, I think Ao Komatsu has come in and steadied the ship, got the team focusing on the right things, got the team maximising what they can and maximising the package that they had, which was not a bad car that they had last year. You know, it was always good in quali, but struggled in its race tyre preservation, and they've got on top of that, and they've maintained a lot of that quali pace that they had last year, which is good. They've got two good drivers. Well, Hulkenberg's very good. Magnussen, it does look like his time in F1's coming to a close. He was talking to Lawrence Barretto in the interviews pre-race, talking about options. You know, he's kind of open to things. I think he's kind of laying the groundwork for life outside of F1, because it looks like Ollie Behrman's going to get a seat. Obviously, Ollie won the sprint this weekend, then had a engine issue. Well, no. Was it an engine issue? Was it a mecha? Did he get mecha chromed? Did Ollie get mecha chromed? I didn't actually watch the feature. I watched the sprint. But I know he had a car issue. So another struggle for Ollie in terms of points, right? Because feature race is where all the points come. But it looks like it's going to be Ollie. And then Esteban is the driver who's most closely linked with that other Haas seat. So, and I think of the options available, I think Ocon, without a doubt, right? Again, a lot of the criticism of Ocon as a teammate is fair. I do. But he's still quality. Like, he is still quality. And I think Haas, to get a driver like Esteban in alongside Ollie, I think that's both lanky boys as well, both tall boys. Like to see it. And so chassis, you know, a bit easier. Both drivers being the same proportions. So yeah, I think that seems to be where it's going. Ocon and Behrman next year, and I'm sure getting Behrman in Ferrari will give them a little discount on the engines or something. I'm sure there's something in it for Haas for them to take what would be a gamble from Haas's point of view on Ollie Behrman. But yeah, we'll see. We will see. But yeah, well done Haas. Big dub for them. McLaren. Okay, we'll talk about... I mean, I've kind of said my piece on Lando. I think he drove a good race. I think he wasn't at fault for the incident. I do think, looking back, he'll have wished he took to the curb, because it's probably worth it in the grand scheme of things. But there you go. Oscar Piastri, and I'm going to ask actually, I'll get a little poll going. And also, I want to get your answer. I don't want to get like I want to get what you think racing should be. Okay, what you believe is the best thing for racing. Okay, do you believe Oscar deserved to have his lap time deleted? Okay, so this is based on what you think, with the gravel trap now included at that corner, what you think should have happened. Okay. I'm not asking you, oh, well, in the regulations it said that. I'm asking what you think should have happened. Should Oscar have had his lap time deleted? So again, if you didn't see it, obviously, turn, again, I don't know what turn it is, 8, maybe? 6, 7? The left-hander, gravel on the outside, and Oscar does appear to go all 4 wheels outside of the white line, but obviously there is now gravel there, and his wheel doesn't actually go into the gravel. It's like half of his back wheel is over the gravel, but the other half is on the curb. So he doesn't really lose any time. He does technically go outside the white line, but the whole point of the gravel is a deterrent, because of course if you go wide you lose time. Not only at that corner, but you get your wheels dusty in, so you're losing time through the subsequent corners, because, you know, you've got a high-speed left-hander straight after, and then you've got 2 high-speed right-hand corners after that. So, as we saw from Charles, if you dip a wheel in the gravel there, it affects your ability to go quickly through the remainder of the sector. So the idea is it's a natural deterrent, so we're not having this nonsense with track limits like we got last year, okay? So... and you can call it black and white, Professor C, all you like, but we'll get into this. So, do you believe Oscar deserved to have his lap time deleted? So, 43% of you say yes, 57% of you say no. Okay. So, for me, this isn't a conversation around Oscar Piastri or McLaren or whatever. Okay. If you are going to put in a natural deterrent like gravel, particularly gravel, because gravel is the most destructive deterrent there is, apart from a wall, obviously, right? In terms of like runoff deterrents, you've got AstroTurf, you've got grass, you've got tarmac, which is no deterrent, right? And obviously there's tarmac on the outside of turn 3, hence why. It is my belief, okay, the way it should be, in my opinion, is that any corner that has a natural deterrent, so be that corner, be that the turn 4, the downhill right-hander, same case there. Any corner with gravel on the outside of the curb doesn't need track limits. Tell me, what does put in track limits at a corner like that serve? What does it serve? Because the point of a track limit is to punish a driver who has gone wide and potentially gained performance, right? And gained, right, you can run off, you carry more speed, whatever. At a corner like that, there is no need to have track limits, because the deterrent stops you don't gain anything from extending. Now, obviously, the issue is that there was still enough of a gap that you could Oscar literally, it's like to the millimetre almost. You could get a car just that side of the white line, but also just not on the gravel. That shouldn't have been the case in the first place. That is a flaw, in my opinion. That is a flaw, because all you need to do is move that white line a couple of centimetres further out for everyone. Remember, this isn't just for Oscar, it's for everyone. A couple of centimetres further, so that it is physically impossible to fit an F1 car in that space without dipping a wheel. Because as soon as you dip a wheel, which Oscar didn't do, and again, just because half his wheel was literally hanging over the gravel. Like, I think that's what they meant to do. That was the idea. But Oscar literally threaded the needle perfectly, that he didn't dip a wheel, but also did technically extend the line. That should never have been allowed to happen, because it's just silly. Like, it's like when Charles dipped his wheel and then went wide, and then it was like, oh yeah, Charles had his lap time deleted. Well, obviously, yeah. Like, what is the point? The point of dinging track limit is to punish a driver who's potentially gained from going off track, right? That should never have been a conversation with this corner, because the natural deterrent should not have allowed a car to technically extend track limits. But I'm not asking you about the technicalities of it. I'm asking you about what you think racing should be. And I don't think any of you, why would anyone think that there needs to be a track limit ding on a corner where it is physically impossible to extend track limits and not go in the gravel, right? Unfortunately, on that corner, there was this tiny fractional window either side where you could just fit a car in. But that's a technicality. That's not the way I think the rule should be, and I don't think that's the way they designed the rule to be either. And I think on a corner like that, don't get me wrong, on turn 3, right, where you've got tarmac on the outside, you can go wide and you can use the runoff and come back on. Track limits there, fine. Turn 1, right, there's runoff, there's obviously a sausage curb, and there's tarmac. Track limits there, fine. I'm fine with that. I'm good with that, right? But that corner does not need, like no one is going to look at that corner where Oscar went wide, right? And imagine if they didn't ping Oscar for track limits, right? Imagine looking at what Oscar did in that corner, right? And say that they've not given him track limits. Imagine looking at what Oscar did there and being like, no, he deserves track limits for that. Like, he literally got as close as you can get to the gravel without going in the gravel on a corner where it's just curb and gravel. That does not deserve to be punished. And the same happened to Lewis. Well, I think Lewis had that in sprint qualifying as well. And obviously Lewis, it was a bigger story for Oscar because he dropped from P3 to P7 for the main race. But Lewis, I'm pretty sure Lewis had it as well. I've not actually seen the replay of Lewis, but I saw people mention Lewis had something similar. Like, come on. It's just silly. And it's an oversight. I believe that is just an oversight, that they literally just gave a little bit too much room where you could technically fit a car in. Because if you just shorten that curb by 20 centimetres, 10 centimetres, whatever, so you literally can't, the only way of fitting remember, these cars are regulated. The width and the length of these cars are regulated. They're all the same. So you just build in a little bit less margin so that if you go all 4 wheels outside the white line, you will dip a wheel. And if you dip a wheel, you will lose time. And therefore, you don't need to faff about with these stupid track deletions for a corner that doesn't even merit that. I've said my piece, okay? I've said my piece. The question isn't white lines. The question is, should the FIA police track limits when they already have policed it with a gravel trap? No, exactly that clause. I don't think there is any need to police track limits. There shouldn't be any need to police track limits on a corner with gravel on the outside, because the gravel will slow you down. And there shouldn't be this margin where you can technically, you can technically fit a car just within it. And I think that's silly. It's so silly to get a lap time deleted for that. I don't care if it's Oscar or Lewis or Alex Albon or my least favourite driver in the world, whoever that may be. I don't care. I don't care who it is. That's just so silly. It's so silly. And I think that's what Oscar was getting at when he said it was like embarrassing, because it's silly. You can't look at that and be like, oh yeah, he deserves to get pinged for track limits there. Like, it's, come on. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. So I don't believe, like, I think it's the FIA's oversight. That's what I think. Any opportunity to slander the FIA, we are here. We are here. But yeah, you agree, you might disagree, okay? That's what I believe. I believe well-enforced natural deterrence. The whole point of a natural deterrent is to deter and to punish if you exceed. That's the point. The point of the deterrent is to punish when you exceed. Oscar exceeded technically, but wasn't punished. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. That is the problem. That is the thing. That is what is fair and just. And all they need to do next year is just move that curb a little bit, just chop a little bit off the curb, right? Or extend the gravel a little bit more, or move the white line a little bit more, whatever, right? Just to not allow a full car's width within that gap, and then we're fine. And you don't need to worry about track limits at that corner. And then there's no FIA personnel looking at the line, being like, yep, track limits, yep, track limits. Like, there's none of that, no faffing about, right? You either go off or you stay on the track. Simple as. It should be like it should be black and white. But unfortunately, there's this tiny grey area that Oscar got into, and he was punished, and I don't think he deserved to be. Anyway, next, Mercedes. Yeah, I think George deserves a lot of credit for what he did, and although he did say yabba dabba doo on the radio after he won, so if they do take the trophy off of him for that, I wouldn't be against it, because that's George Russell, isn't it? You know, he embraces the brand. He does the whole like, hands out again. He embraces the brand George Russell. It's funny. It was funny. But yeah, no, he did a great job. Totally getting on the radio. You can win this, George. I can't do an Austrian accent. It's like, let me get on with it. And yeah, who knows with Lewis if he didn't cop that damage where he could have ended up, because that car clearly did have pace, and in the races that is where Lewis typically comes alive relative to George. So I think without that damage, you're seeing a Hamilton podium at the least, maybe even a 1-2. But yeah, all in all, pretty good day for Mercedes. Got to take that. And George didn't put a foot wrong, didn't make a mistake, which he is liable to do in touch, push comes to shove moments, but also he had enough of a gap to Oscar that he was fairly comfortable by the end. So well done, Mercedes. About time. Pulled it out. That front wing was really a game changer. Thank you, David, by the way, for the super chat. Just joined. In my opinion, the stewards are to blame for Norris Verstappen. If he got 10 seconds straight away for moving under braking, this would not have happened. Yeah, I mean, I do think the evidence suggests that he was moving under braking. So I think, yeah, if that had been punished but beforehand, then perhaps. There certainly wasn't any post-punishment for Max for moving under braking, so I think that demonstrates that it wasn't clear and obvious moving under braking. I think it probably was, but there was enough grey area that I think Max just about got away with it. And drivers play with these limits, Sometimes you overstep and get punished. Sometimes you overstep and don't. Sometimes you understep and also get punished. So, yeah, game's the game. Game is the game. Racing balls. Well done, Daniel. About time. More of these, please. I think there has to be a clause in Checo's contract that if by the end of the year Daniel has impressed enough, and like we keep saying it with Daniel, but like we are now at almost mid-season point, right? Silverstone is round 12 of 24. If Daniel beats Yuki every single race for the remainder of this year consistently, he will still out-qualify by Yuki. But if he can consistently outperform Yuki for the rest of the season, and Checo keeps honking, because he's honking bad right now, he's still got a chance at that seat. I'm sure he has. Because I've got no doubt that Christian would like to see Ricciardo in that seat if he believes that, I mean, the brand Ricciardo is huge. The brand Checo is more lucrative to Red Bull from a cans sold point of view and merch sold, all that crazy percentages of merch they shift in Mexico. But yeah, at least I think Daniel at least needs to give Christian a decision to make at the end of the year. But yeah, I do worry for Checo. I do. But I guess we'll get onto that in the Red Bull bit. But yeah, good momentum from Ricciardo. Difficult weekend for Tsunoda. I think that Yuki's does have an inconsistent streak in him. And I think, again, maybe that's part of the recipe as to, because, you know, Yuki loves a restaurant, the recipe that is working against Yuki in his, you know, conquest to get into a Red Bull seat. I rate Yuki very highly. He does have moments where he'll struggle with consistency. He does have head loss moments, etc., etc. Like, yeah, not a great weekend for him. But we'll see. Time will tell with Daniel. He just needs to keep performing like he did yesterday, because I think it was a very good drive from him. Very good drive. Red Bull, yeah, so Max, kind of said my piece on him. And again, the team kind of let him down. I think if they don't have that long pit stop, then Max probably, Lando doesn't even get close enough to, again, it's one thing catching up to Max, it's another thing passing Max. And he was definitely somewhat over the line, but with the squeeze, again, I think it was, I can get why he squeezed Lando and expected Lando to use the curb, because many drivers would in that instance, and Lando chose not to. He wasn't obliged to, and Max got a 10-second penalty, and he was forcing him off. So I've not got much more to say on Max. Still good points, still outscored Lando and Charles. Checo is becoming a bit of a problem now. Oscar's caught right up. Hang on, what are we looking at in terms of, let me find the driver standings in my graphics. So I've just got to hide loads of these because they're all PNGs that I set up beforehand. So here are the driver standings. So Oscar is now just 6 points behind Checo, and George is 7 points behind Checo. Lewis is 33 behind Checo. Now, obviously, given recent races, and maybe Red Bull will find an upgrade and can find a way for Checo to get a bit more pace, but given the momentum right now, P8 is not out of the question for Sergio Perez. And if Max, which he's looking like he's going to win the Drivers' Championship in P1, if Checo can only finish P6, 7, maybe even 8, and Red Bull don't win the Constructors, which again, the Constructors gap between Red Bull and Ferrari is 64 points. I mean, I'm not even, like, this isn't really a thing to dunk on Checo as much, right? Because we've seen Gasly struggles in that car. We've seen Albon struggle in that car. We're now seeing Checo struggle in that car. Checo, Alex and Pierre are all known entities, and I think Pierre's having a very good season this year. I think Alex is struggling to show the quality he had last year, because I think that Williams is a consistently better car, but it hasn't got the peaks in performance that the Williams had last year. Checo has to take a lion's share of the responsibility on his end for performance not improving now into his fourth season at that team. But Red Bull have facilitated an environment where you've now had 3 quality drivers, not talking greatest of all time, right, candidates, because Max certainly is one of them, right? Max is incredible. But there is an environment there, for whatever reason, that Max can excel, and it is incredibly difficult for anyone else to come in and excel as well. I think you look at McLaren, how Oscar's come in and very quickly gotten up to pace and is showcasing what he can do. You look at Carlos Sainz when he came into Ferrari, you know, that was a big move, and straight away he was kind of on pace with Charles. Even like George coming into Mercedes, obviously I know he was test and reserve for a long time, but you know, he's coming in, he's never really looked out of his depth alongside Lewis. Now, obviously, I know a lot of Max fans will take this opportunity to be like, yeah, but Max is just so much better than everyone else. And I agree. I think he's the best driver in F1 right now. But to say that he's so much better, that he's just on this absolute level, like comfortably clear, like the gap between, I don't know, Lionel Messi and Ronaldo and like the rest, right? I think that is to very much overlook the quality of Charles, of Lewis, of George, of Lando, of so many of these drivers, right? Max is better than everyone else, I agree. He's not so much better that he's taking a... Because to say that would be to imply that the Red Bull, actually, the RB20 isn't that good. And right now, it's what, in Checo's hands, it's the fourth best car. And that Max is just so good that he's making it look dominant. I don't believe that's the case. I think Max is the best driver in F1, but Checo is not a mug. And I think Red Bull, they have a responsibility, and they have to take a degree of the responsibility as to why this second seat has just not worked. Since 2019 now, this second seat has not worked. Because even 2021, look at the average finishing position difference. Yes, Checo had his moments where he was helping Max, but he wasn't taking points off Lewis. He was never taking points off Lewis, Checo. Apart from those odd occasions in like Turkey and obviously in Abu Dhabi. And Bottas wasn't helping Hamilton either, by the way. Like they both let their teammates down in those years. And you can argue Bottas more because Lewis didn't win the title. And yeah, I think, like you say, Teva, I think he's a fraction better, like 1% better than the rest. And these fine margins in Formula One pay dividends. And I think the drivers we have at the top of F1 right now are some of the best racing drivers in the world. I don't think we have that same meritocracy problem that we've had in the past. Yes, of course, Lance is in the sport, Joe's in the sport, Sargent's still in, which, yeah. But, like, Red Bull need to sort this out because it's pretty embarrassing, really, and so much of like my opinion on Checo, when I've talked about Checo, and I've done my video about Checo a little while ago, I just like feel for him, because it's like, this car doesn't fit, it doesn't work for him. Like, I don't know how much longer we can keep seeing this and not just come to the conclusion that this car does not work for him. It doesn't work with his style of driving. And different drivers have different styles. I was literally watching a clip last night, and it was Jenson Button talking about how different him and Lewis Hamilton's driving styles were at McLaren, right? Lewis is like, slams on the brake, gets on the throttle very quickly, and uses the steering wheel to kind of keep the car under control. Jenson would modulate the brake, modulate the throttle, be very smooth on the wheel, but control the car with the pedals. Lewis does more of the controlling of the car with the wheel, right? And these are two guys who at McLaren, obviously Jenson won a world title in 2009 in Brawn. They were teammates at McLaren and both won races in that period. You know, drivers do have different styles and different techniques, and Checo's does not work in this car. Pierre's didn't work in that car. He was also very young. It was only his second full season in F1. So there's that as well. There's that caveat. I think the expectation also was higher for Pierre because Ricciardo was pretty close to Max and had been there for a long time. And obviously he beat Vettel in 2014 or whatever. Ricciardo was established. Max came in, did really well. You obviously don't let Villeneuve hear me giving some kind of credit to Ricciardo. And yeah, I think Pierre, because of that expectation with Ricciardo, it was like, oh wow, Pierre's nowhere near as close as Ricciardo was to Max. He must just be trash, so we'll drop him. And then when Alex came in, there was a bit more of a concession, because it's like, oh, Pierre struggled, now Alex has come in. He actually did a really good job. He got that 2020 seat on merit because he did a better job in 2019 in that Red Bull relative to Max than Pierre did. But then in 2020, he absolutely honked. I'll be the first to admit that, right? And then when Checo came in, it's like, well, Pierre honked, Alex honked, so benefit of doubt for Checo. He also played his part in certain moments to help Max in 21. So I completely understood why Checo got an extension for 22. But you just can't keep pushing this square peg into this round hole and expecting different results. what's it? Is it the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results? Like, it's just, it's a shame because I think Checo's he's got a few wins at Red Bull, which he'll be able to hold on to for the rest of his, life. Like, these are big moments for him, and he wouldn't have necessarily got them if he didn't go to Red Bull. But yeah, it's kind of the legacy of Checo is not going to be anywhere near as positive as it would have been if he'd have, stayed at what is now Aston Martin. That's mad to think, isn't it? He would have been at Aston Martin. So yes, it's not good, and I don't believe it will get any better. I think last year it was like, as soon as everyone catches up, he's gonna start getting really found out, and that's exactly what's happening. And I feel like I'm surprised if Red Bull are as good, as quality a team as I do believe they are. How have they not been able to make this work even a bit better with Checo? When you've got Carlos walking into Ferrari and doing well, George walking into Mercedes and doing well, Oscar walking into McLaren and doing well. Even just relative to your teammate, like Pierre walking into Alpine, and at least last year, maybe even outperformed Esteban. Struggled start of this year, but in his first season at Alpine, immediately adjusted. Yes, I know Verstappen is better than Ocon. I know Verstappen's better than Leclerc. I know Verstappen's better than Hamilton. I know Verstappen's better than Norris. But not by this insane, godly amount where he's Lionel Messi and everyone else is like League 2. Come on. And to say Perez was getting beat by Stroll in 2020, Yazans, that is I don't know about that. Perez was very good in 2020. He wasn't getting beaten by Stroll. Like, okay, Stroll had his moments, but Stroll's had his moments against Alonso. Like, come on, behave. Anyway, right, that's enough on that. Anyway, I've waffled far too long. It's an hour and a half, blimey. Sauber. Do I have anything to say about Sauber? They weren't very good. Again. I think I was thinking about doing a video on Bottas. I'd like to look over the time at Sauber because there's two people that I've backed this year who've disappointed me, and it's Gareth Southgate, because I did back Southgate before this tournament, and seeing how we're playing, even if we win, he has to go, and we're not going to win. But even if we got so lucky in one, he has to go. And Zhou Guanyu, because I was expecting a lot more from Zhou this year, and he's really stalled, if not gone backwards. I think Valtteri can do a really good job at Williams, even at Haas. I think he'd do a really good job at Haas. I think he deserves to stay in the sport, Valtteri. But yeah, I've really got nothing to say. Thank you, Thomas, for the super chat. Here we go. Crazy when Daniel Ricciardo was losing to Yuki, the media and fans were hating him, but when Daniel was 4 places and 20 seconds ahead for 3 races, standards changed. Well, look, what I will say regarding that is that I think the expectations for Daniel Ricciardo as a 8-time race winner, been in the sport since 2012, I think. The expectations for Daniel are higher than they are for Yuki Tsunoda. So you're right in what you say, standards change, but I think the expectations are different. And I think, that is fair. I think you've got a driver with, look at Vettel when he went to Ferrari, right? As a 4-time world champion at Red Bull, went to Ferrari, had a really strong, particularly 17 and 18. And then obviously Leclerc comes in as a rookie, and I believe he outperforms Vettel. I think he does a better job in his rookie season alongside Sebastian Vettel. And because of Seb's experience, and because he's a 4-time, the expectation and standards are higher. And I think the expectations and standards of Daniel Ricciardo are higher because we know he's only got that opportunity at Racing Bulls because of the past relationship with Red Bull and now his brand appeal. If De Vries had Ricciardo's brand, De Vries would still be in that seat. I think that kind of says it all, right? But Daniel is improving, and he has... Well, he's improving. He's showing signs, but he's showed signs before. That's the thing. He's showed signs of improvement before, and it's stalled. So time will tell whether that can carry on. Anyway, right. Nothing to say on Sauber. No more of that. Williams, Williams rubbish, really. Not very good this weekend, not very quick. Alex thought he could have maybe got a P12, 13. He thought the performance was there in the car, but couldn't deliver. And then Logan got damage early doors. He said his race pace was good. He kind of always says that. I don't know if it's always true. I think it is true sometimes, but not always. I've seen a lot of suggestions Logan's going to IndyCar with the Prima IndyCar team, because that's going to be new for next year. And he's ex-Prima from the F3 days. So I hope Logan falls on his feet, but we know he's not going to be in F1 next year. So I just hope he can give a bit of a better account of himself. Obviously, he out-qualified Alex in the sprint quali, which is good. Something. But he's only out-qualified Alex in the sprints, I believe. Oh, yeah, and that time that Alex got his time deleted, was it Miami? That was a main race, I think. Or was that a sprint? I don't even remember. Either way, not a good day for Williams. Right, okay, I'm done, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to go now. How sunny is it outside? Oh, sun's still out. I'm going to go sit by the pool and maybe sit in there's a big rubber ring that I could maybe sit in. I was sitting in it earlier, but then it made my back really sore. So I'm going to go get a sangria maybe, actually. I might get sangria. I fancy a sangria. Thank you all for watching wherever you are in the world. I appreciate you all taking the time. There'll be no main video this week because I'm away. But obviously I did my little video last night. So maybe give that a watch if you haven't already. Right? I uploaded it at 2 a.m. but I couldn't sleep. So there you go. Thank you all. Appreciate you all taking the time again. And don't forget to like the stream, subscribe if you're new. Apple Podcasts, rating, tell me I'm great because my ego loves it. And thank you all for the generous... Actually, have I missed any... Did I miss any super chat? I don't think I missed any super chats. Oh, wait, no, I think I do. I think I have. Hang on, let me cover a few super chats that I missed before I go, actually. Apologies to anyone whose super chat I've missed. You're so good to me. You're all so good to me. Right, we've got Clinton's done. Yeah, oh, Bosch, lovely. Thank you, Clinton. Fernando, fastest lap. Lucas, we did yours. Say, I missed yours. Thank you, Say Rogara for the super chat. Have to respect Verstappen as a competitor. He always believes if he cannot win, neither can the person he's directly challenging. No, someone asked Max after the race, didn't they? They were like, why don't you just let him past? I'm like, bro, you realise you're talking to Max Verstappen? Like, that is not his mentality. And I'm glad. I don't think that should be any driver's mentality. Like, unless you're in a scrap title fight, like 2021, that's the only kind of year where I could, like, say, I don't know, Max was getting pressure from Carlos Sainz or something in 2021, and it's either crash and get no points or stay, let Carlos through and get 18 points. In a season like 2021, fine. But like, no, Max has got like a 70-point lead or whatever it is. Like, that's never going to happen. So asked that of him, it was like hilarious. So I respect. I've got a lot of respect for like Max's determination and his mentality, his mindset. I think that is a huge component to any top athlete to get them to where they are. I think Schumacher had a mean streak in him. Senna, Prost, these guys had their moments. Having that. Everyone's different, but I think having that absolute determination, that streak in you, it serves you more than it hinders you, I think. That's what I'd say. Thank you, LKWD. Unpopular opinion, Hamilton pit entry penalty was BS. I don't know I mean, it's pit entry line, so I've not really got much to say on that. But fair. And thank you for the super chat, appreciate it. Thank you, Alfie. God, why have I missed so many of these? Well, they usually pop up in the chat, but they've just not been doing it this time. Thank you, Alfie. Irony of Max wanting to race in other disciplines like WEC, that only F1 allows his antics like driving cars off track instead of racing wall to wall. Oh, have you been watching other disciplines? Have you ever watched IndyCar, Alfie? Because they're very guilty of it. No, I don't. I think F1 punishes more wheel to wheel. I think in other disciplines, what you would get is that if Max tries that, the other car will like give it back, and like contact that Max and Lando had, that contact at turn 3, if that contact happens in IMSA, right, or some GT cars, well, they just carry on. There's no damage. Neither of them got like F1's open wheel, so it punishes you a lot more. And I reckon that these Pirellis are a bit more fragile than the Firestones you get in IndyCar as well. I could be incorrect there, but so I don't think that's the case actually, Alfie. I'll be honest, I don't think that. Did you see bloody? I remember when I was looking at Liam Lawson, doing my Liam Lawson video, and I was looking at DTM when he came second in 2021, whenever it was, when he got harpooned by Van der Linde. Like, bro, these DTM lot are elbows out, right? No, elbows out is not unique to F1. Thank you, Bivek, as well. Max crash aside, do you believe Max was changing directions in braking zones prior? And if so, how would you like to see FIA deal with this in the future? Yeah, again, I think he probably was. I think the Anthony Davidson recap is very accurate. I think he breaks it down really well. And he literally drives the Mercedes sim, so he knows when you should be braking for these corners in these cars. I think as for the change in the directions, I don't know. It's a fine line thing. I've not got like a strong opinion either way on the change in directions thing, to be honest. I don't really know. I don't really know what I'd do, because it is just subjective to the stewards who are stewarding the race in the moment, and those stewards change race on race as well. So yeah, I'm not really too sure with that one, to be honest, Vivek. I don't really have a strong take on that. You know, do I think it was a bit over the line? Probably, yeah. But enough to, I don't know what the right penalty is. I'm not really sure. Honestly, sometimes you just got to be like, I just don't know. Know what you don't know. You know, don't have to have a strong opinion on literally every single thing in the world. That's right. Done them. Done that one. And that one. I think we're good. Calling Max first drivers and Red Bull third constructors. Clinton, ouch. Savage. Oh yeah, and thank you, Christopher, as well. 100%. If Danny keeps placing P7 to 10 the rest of the season, he will be considered for Red Bull second seat. Danny is the reason VCarb has the Visa Cash App sponsorship. Yeah, he's been doing some sponsor. I've seen some ads, Visa ads with Ricardo in, so we know he's being, you know, strung out the old marketing side of Ricardo. Get him out there. Right, okay. I'm actually done now. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for all the super chats. Super generous. Far too kind to me. But thank you for everything you do. I really appreciate it. And I love, like, you know, even when I'm on holiday, I still love talking about F1. And I still want to talk about F1. And I can leave Han reading her book downstairs on the Sun Lounger. And I'm going to go join her. So appreciate you all taking the time. Thank you all. And pre-race stream will probably be on Thursday. Yeah, because I'm not back till like early Thursday. So I'll be on Thursday at some point for the pre-race stream for the British Grand Prix. Up the British bias, as per always. Come on. Bye, everyone.